Welcome to No Power Panel. Thanks for joining me. I'm your host, Noam. I promise we're going to have a good episode this week. I have on an incredible guest, and I'm really excited for you to hear from him. That is Canadian author Terry Fallis, who has written 9 books, written 10. His 10th is about to be published. It is called The Marionette. He joins me to talk about his character, Angus McLintock, who is a fictional Canadian member of Parliament in his series of novels featuring Angus and the narrator of the novels, Daniel Addison, who is Angus's aide. They're funny, they're intelligent, they're witty, they're very satirical, and Terry joins me to talk about political satire and writing politics and how politics has changed since the first of the novels, the first 2 of the novels, The Best Laid Plans and The High Road, have come out. So please stick around if you want to hear a very fun conversation with me and Terry Fallis about that. The timestamp will be in the description if you want to skip on ahead to that, because before we get there, unfortunately, I do need to address what is happening in political news lately. And in particular, this week I kind of want to focus on one story. I know that sometimes I touch on a few, and that's helpful. But the reality is that this week I want to say a little bit more on one story in particular, which, as you might be able to guess from the thumbnail, is the shooting of Charlie Kirk and the aftermath of it, particularly more so on the aftermath and what's going on here in Canada in light of that happening. To get it out of the way, Charlie Kirk, of course, was assassinated earlier this week. He was killed while doing an event and shot through the neck. The video is obviously disturbing, and we can move past that piece of this relatively quickly because most of what there is to say about the actual shooting has been said by others. And I don't want to repeat what anyone else is saying. That's not why I'm here. He was shot by Tyler James Robinson, allegedly. He's who has been arrested and charged for this crime. And there's lots of great reporting from what has gone on with that, as well as we're starting to learn more details about who Tyler Robinson is. But I'm a firm believer in not giving a great deal of attention to people who commit violent crimes. Obviously, we need to talk about the crimes themselves as far as we need to, and we need to have an understanding of who those people are so far as to be able to try them and convict them and send them to prison. And that's the way that's supposed to work. But when it comes to things like this, when it comes to assassinations, when it comes to mass shootings, when it comes to anything like that, I just feel like we need to not give the attention to the ones who are doing the actual crime. So I'm going to move on from speaking about Tyler Robinson fairly quickly into what the reaction of the right has been. In the aftermath of the shooting, I put out a video on Shorts on YouTube and on TikTok and our social media platforms discussing what I felt like needed to be said, which was that the right was going to use this. They were going to weaponize this. They were going to turn Charlie Kirk into a martyr, and they were going to use that and his death to justify harsh treatment of the left. And very quickly we saw that that's what happened. Very quickly we saw right-wing spokespeople and commentators and politicians trying to predetermine who the shooter was, trying to blame the left for this. They have been circulating those who they claim are celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. It's not celebrating what most of these people are doing. It's reminding everyone that Charlie Kirk was a monster, that Charlie Kirk was a racist, homophobic, transphobic, misogynistic bigot who does not, I don't want to say he doesn't deserve any kind of sympathy or anything, because human beings are human beings, and that's what I preach here on No Power Panel. I believe that all human life has value, and I don't believe in political violence. I condemn political violence of any kind against anyone. That being said, Charlie Kirk believed that 10-year-old girls who are SA'd should have to carry their the fetus if to term if they are impregnated. Charlie Kirk said that about his 10-year-old daughter. Charlie Kirk believed that what is going on in Palestine and Gaza was morally justified. Charlie Kirk was not a good person. And so there is a dichotomy that exists between reminding people of that and celebrating his death. Those two things are not the same. They are separate. And we can do one as the left. It's important that we do one as the left because there are still people out there who have been influenced by Charlie Kirk. There are still people out there who are trying to say the same things that he said. And so, no, the right is not going to get a free pass on this to let this become the norm of acceptable things to say and acceptable beliefs to hold just because one of their violent in his rhetoric people was killed. That's not the way that this is going to work. In particular, here in Canada, there is a journalist that many people know of. I follow her work quite closely. I like a lot of what she says and what she does. Rachel Gilmore. And she was essentially kind of trying to make this point, and the point about the right attacking people on the left for this and how scary this could become. And one of our conservative politicians, a member of parliament for the Conservative Party of Canada, Andrew Scheer, who is the former leader of the Conservative Party of Canada and was Pierre Poilievre's choice to lead them in the House of Commons in the spring sitting after the election when Pierre had been trounced in Carleton. And so he said something, he tweeted Rachel Gilmore. And so Andrew Scheer quote tweeted Rachel Gilmore. And I'm not going to repeat what he said because it was offensive, it was wrong, and it was deeply, deeply problematic. You can go and look up his tweet. I believe it's still on his Twitter feed, and he hasn't removed it as of this recording. But hopefully, I'm wrong about that. Hopefully by the time you're watching this, you'll have to find a screenshot of it, because it was something that very clearly put a target on Rachel Gilmore's back. It was a dog whistle to right-wing crazy people. And Rachel Gilmore is now getting threat after threat after threat. She has been getting targeted messages. She has people messaging her that they know where she lives, that they are going to do things, violently describing the things that they are going to do to her. And Andrew Scheer put this target on her back by sending out that tweet to all of his mass audience. He deliberately put that target onto a journalist for covering a story. This goes against freedom of the press. It goes against free speech. It goes against free expression. It goes towards violence from him and his audience. He is a smart politician. He has been in the House of Commons of Canada since 2004 for more than 20 years. In that time, he has served as the Speaker of the House of Commons, as the leader of one of the two major parties in the House of Commons twice. He has served as the House leader, and he is an incredibly intelligent man. I disagree with him on fundamentally almost everything that there is to disagree with somebody on. But he is an incredibly intelligent man. There is no way that he did not understand what some in his audience's reaction would be by saying what he said. This is disqualifying as a member of parliament. Please, if you live in Regina Capel, which is Andrew Scheer's riding, immediately you have to call for his resignation. You have to be starting petitions with your neighbors. You have to be tabling at grocery stores. You have to be making this one of the loudest campaigns, because if they think they can get away with it this time, then they are going to get away with it again and again and again until Rachel Gilmore or somebody like her pays the price. If you live outside of Regina Capel, if you live in a riding with a Conservative member of Parliament, write your member of Parliament. Tell them that the Conservative caucus needs to turn on Andrew Scheer, needs to disown Andrew Scheer. He needs to be excommunicated. He needs to be told by his Conservative colleagues to resign. Not just expelled from caucus, that should be a given. But he needs to be called on by his Conservative colleagues to resign. If you live in a riding where you do not have a Conservative member of Parliament, you need to write your member of Parliament and tell them that they should boycott any committee meeting that Andrew Scheer goes to. They should not allow him to speak in the House of Commons without constant viral interruptions. There should be no way that he is able to exist in Parliament from this point forward, particularly because in Canada we have something called parliamentary privilege. It's something that we have. It's something that exists in the United States. It's something that exists in Great Britain. It's something that exists in most parliaments that descend from the Westminster system. And essentially what it does is it gives members of Parliament, Congress people, senators, and the like, the right and the ability to speak freely without threat of legal repercussions when they are in their parliamentary setting. So in Canada, A member of our House of Commons or a senator can stand on the floor of the House of Commons or the Senate and say absolutely anything. And they cannot get into any legal consequences for what they say. They have absolute immunity for anything said in Parliament. And that's important. That's important because there are times where they have to use it to expose truths that they would be sued or in legal jeopardy for saying without that legal threat. They're able to say that. It's important because there are important topics that need to be discussed in Parliament without them being afraid of legal ramifications. So I don't oppose parliamentary privilege existing. What I oppose is people who have a track record of saying things that incite violence or have the potential to incite violence, having access to that privilege. Andrew Scheer should never again be allowed to stand in the House of Commons and speak, because if Andrew Scheer stands in the House of Commons and says something like what he said in his tweet, targeted directly at a specific journalist, he will not be able to get into any trouble if somebody acts on it. As it is, because this was a tweet, if somebody goes and attacks Rachel Gilmore, Andrew Scheer can be charged with incitement, and should be. Otherwise, we're left in this situation where the Conservative Party of Canada becomes a tool for the violent right wing. That's not what Pierre Poilievre should want. It's not what Conservative Party voters should want. It's not what the Canadian public should want. It's not what opposition MPs should want. Please, this is something that we need to act on. We cannot let them get away with this. It cannot become the norm that when journalists are doing their job, they are attacked. We see what that looks like in America. We see what dictatorial behavior looks like in America. Don't let it come to Canada. Elbows up.
No suits, no script, just heat on the mic. Noam's in the chair, calling out the hype with guest co-hosts, keeping it raw. Politics, power, no holds barred. It's no power panel, we say it loud. Crack through the headlines, cut through the crowd, laugh through the chaos, burn through the spin. If you're not angry, are you even tuned in? This is the No Power Panel. Let's begin.
Well, now I'm thrilled to be joined this week by Terry Fallis, Canadian author. And it's a bit of a reunion. Terry and I were talking just before we started recording and realized that we had met for the first time when I was 15 years old, 15 years ago. So I'm very pleased to have Terry join us. He's an award-winning Canadian author known for writing compelling narratives filled with humor and engaging characters. He first gained prominence with his debut novel, The Best Laid Plans. He currently has 9 books on shelves, with his 10th, The Marionette, out in October. Before his writing career, Terry was a PR professional and a podcast host. However, prior to that, and relevant to my podcast and our topics, he served multiple Liberal Party politicians at federal and provincial levels. Thanks for joining the podcast today, Terry.
Well, thanks for having me. It's nice to be chatting with you again, given how long it's been since we first met.
Absolutely. So I wanted to have you on because, quite frankly, the character of Angus McLintock was in a lot of ways a kind of political wake-up for me when I first read him way back when. I mean, my dad and my grandfather and all of that really got me interested in politics. But it wasn't until reading the character of Angus that I kind of saw an example of doing things differently that kind of excited me as a kid way back when, who even then wanted to kind of change the system rather than just exist within it. Just for any listeners who don't know the character of Angus, do you want to briefly give a description as to who he is and just the story of him as a character?
Sure. Well, despite his prominence in the novel, he's not the narrator of the novel. The narrator is a guy named Daniel Addison, who is, in a way, like me, though it's not autobiographical. When I worked in politics, he was, a writer and someone who was interested in policy more than he was interested in politics. And he works for the leader of the opposition, the leader of the Liberal Party, when the novel opens. And he's just about done with politics. The relentless tide of acrimony and partisanship and a focus on power rather than on policy has left him jaded and disillusioned, and he tries to escape. He tries to quit, and they say, "Okay, we'll let you quit, but you have to first run. You have to find a Liberal candidate to run in the safest Conservative riding in the land." And when you finish that duty, where he is sure to lose, or he or she is sure to lose, then you may leave. And he's accepted a position as an English professor. He's a PhD in English. Anyway, of course, he can find nobody to run in the riding of Cumberland Prescott. It's a fictitious riding, but in the novel, it has been held by the Conservatives since Confederation, and is currently held by the finance minister, the Conservative finance minister, and the most popular politician in the country at that moment. So he moves to the riding, Daniel moves to the riding, and he snares a great apartment. It's actually in the upper story of a boathouse on the shores of the Ottawa River, and his landlord lives in the big house on the property. His name is Angus McLintock. He's in his early 60s, and he is a Scottish emigre, been in the country for 30 years, though you might think, if you were to speak to him, that he'd arrived on our shores last Thursday. He still has a relatively distinct Scottish accent. And what Daniel learns in the process is that he's a mechanical engineering professor at the University of Ottawa, and he is destined, or sentenced to teaching English to engineers. And he cannot handle that. He's a more literary guy than you might think an engineering professor is. And he just can't stand the prospect of teaching again, the principles of grammar and English and literature to what he considers to be culturally stunted engineering students. So anyway, Daniel hears this when talking to him, and an idea forms in his brain. He says, "Why don't I'm a PhD in English. I'm on the faculty of English at the University of Ottawa. Why don't I teach your English for Engineers class in return for you becoming the in-name only Liberal candidate in the riding of Cumberland Prescott, surely to be led to the electoral slaughter once more." So, and Angus thinks this is a pretty good deal, but he makes Daniel sign a document written on the back of an envelope or a napkin, as I recall, that says that he will do no campaigning. He does not have to be in the country, let alone in the riding, during the election campaign. There will be no signs. There will be no podcast. So he sort of, just to ensure that he loses, he isn't going to be in the country at the time of the campaign, and he won't campaign, and he has no interest in winning. So this all happens, and not to give too much away, but it's pretty well known what happens. A great scandal breaks out during the election campaign that does not cast the Conservative finance minister in a very positive light.
Not at all.
And miraculously, Angus is elected, really not because so many people voted for him, but because so many constituents spoiled their ballots. They couldn't bring themselves to vote for a Liberal, but they couldn't bring themselves to vote for a Conservative cabinet minister who has been caught doing something that seems to violate the family values covenant that he has with his voters, his constituents. So thousands of people spoil their ballots, and Angus squeaks in as the winner. And he's not even in the country when this happens, but when he returns and figures out what happened, he is a man of extraordinary integrity and honor and ethics. And he signed up for this, for better or worse, and clearly this is for worse. He is going to do his job because he committed to doing it. He didn't expect to be elected, didn't expect to have to do it, but turns out fate was against him, and he's elected. And he insists that Daniel will be his executive assistant because he was the one who got him into this. So then you begin to learn more about Daniel, that he is a man of great honor. He doesn't like what he sees in politics. And because he doesn't really want to be reelected and doesn't care whether he's reelected, he's in this rare position where he can follow his heart and his head. He can be honest and he can say what he wants, and he will put the public interest first. And you know, he sort of ranks it as the public interest, his party's interest, I think, and his own interest, in that order. But the public interest, the national interest, has to come first, and that's something we don't see very often in politics. So you can see I'm satirizing politics as it exists today and trying to illuminate a different path through the way that Angus thinks about politics and public service and government. And I had a lot of fun doing it. And I wanted the readers to laugh along the way so they would stay reading the novel and stay on board and stay engaged. And that was how my first novel sort of began its life, and how the fictitious character Angus McLintock came to the attention of at least those who have read the novel.
Too few people, Terry.
Yeah, well.
I'm glad that you brought up a number of those points, because those are the points that I'm wanting to kind of zero in on as we talk. To kind of start, because you really focused just now and throughout the books with him on Angus's integrity, his almost compulsive need to tell the truth, even when politically it might be smarter not to. And that Daniel kind of starts to take on this Angus-like quality. As a former political staffer, was that like need for honesty almost an itch that you felt like you needed to scratch as you started writing the book, given how it seems to lack from real world politics?
Yeah, without question, Noam. I became kind of jaded and disillusioned when I worked on Parliament Hill. I mean, I love my job. I love politics, but I was a bit disenchanted. I arrived on Parliament Hill when I was 24 years old, just out of university. And I was really interested in policy. I'd been really active in the national student movement during my university years. I was president of the Students' Union at McMaster, and so was, I chaired the Economic Policy Committee of the Ontario Federation of Students. helped to write and then present the Ontario Federation of Students response to the MacDonald Commission, the economic future of Canada at the time. And so I was really interested in policy and was less interested in all of the political machinations that I think have really helped to undermine the public's confidence and belief in our democratic institutions. And I didn't really know it was that bad until I got there and was watching from the inside. And for a time, I was in opposition. The Liberals were in opposition in 1984 when Brian Mulroney swept to power. And, one of the issues I talk about in the novel is what should be the role of the opposition party? And part of the problem is the name. Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition. Now it would be His Majesty's Loyal Opposition. And I think that paints the wrong picture, really. I think the opposition's role is not to blindly oppose everything that the government does, regardless of what they do, which is how it's portrayed in the novel, and it's how it plays out in the House of Commons now every day. I think the opposition's job is to hold the government accountable, to challenge policy that has been introduced where challenge is warranted, to support policy that is clearly in the public interest, and that happens so seldom. I mean, it's almost a knee-jerk reaction before they've even read the policy, before it's even been examined by a standing committee. Simply to oppose it because they're the opposition. They're not going to give any additional support to the party in power. And I think that's unfortunate. And I play that out in the novel. I believe it's the throne speech that is presented, but the Conservative government presents the throne speech. And of course, the knee-jerk reaction is that the Liberal caucus decides and the Liberal leadership decides that they will oppose it. But they have it's a minority government, and they sort of can't afford to have people. I may be confusing what happens in that part of the story. But anyway, Angus says, no, I'm not going to oppose it. There are a couple of things there that we really should be doing. So I'm happy to speak against that which has earned our opposition, but I will be speaking in support of these things that is in the public interest, in my view. And anyway, the Liberal Party ends up, supporting the throne speech because they can't afford to have a rogue MP going off and not supporting it. And for other reasons. But so I was just trying to deal with some of those issues that I identified when I was working in politics that really bothered me. I mean, another one would be the role of polling in governing. And of course, I think polling can play an important role in how parties govern. But to me, it ought to be used to help governments communicate with the public and sell the policy that they have been elected to introduce to deal with an important public policy need. Polling should not be used to decide what they're going to do simply by asking the voters what they want. Voters elect governments because they hope their politicians are smarter than they are when it comes to dealing with public policy issues. So
presumably,
polling remains a big problem. I mean, it's good to know how the Canadians are going to react to something, but it shouldn't be the deciding factor. If you know that this is the right policy to pursue, you don't want to not pursue that because the electorate is ill-informed, maybe, and doesn't know enough about this very complicated issue, and are only thinking of themselves probably because they've learned that practice from politicians, to think for themselves only instead of for the country. But,
Absolutely. So, I mean, as you talk about the things that you felt like you wanted to address and the ways in which that molded itself into Angus eschewing traditional styles of politics and traditional campaign techniques, both partisanship in the House and out, as well as campaigns in general, have really progressed quite dramatically since the publishing of Best Laid Plans and The High Road, especially.
right.
How would that adapt for a campaign in the 2020s? What would be Angus's, what are your criticisms for how politics has progressed since that point?
Well, I think probably the biggest development in politics, or in campaigning, maybe the better way to put it, is the emergence and ultimate now dominance of social media, where every politician, not to mention every voter, now has the ability to establish their own broadcasting operation, in a way what you have done, Noam. You have a platform, you have access to ears and minds. Now I think that's great. That's sort of democracy. That's grassroots democracy, the way it's supposed to work. So if Angus were around today, it would give him the power not simply to argue with his caucus mates or cabinet mates if he's in power, or with the media, through the filter of the media, where you don't always get exactly what the spokesperson is wanting to be conveyed. Angus would probably have his own podcast. He might have his own YouTube channel. He might, I'm not sure he would enjoy that part of it, but I think he would recognize the power that it gives him. And because Angus is a bit of a folk hero in the novels from his escapades, I think he would have a pretty large following on the social channels, and that gives him a direct conduit to Canadians. And maybe the quickest way we might persuade Canadians to start thinking about politics in a different way. So I think he might be a man for the moment, if he walked out of the pages of the Best Laid Plans and the High Road and into the House of Commons in real life. But a faint hope, perhaps, but I'm an optimist, and I'm hoping someone will come along who, presents those kinds of characteristics. But,
And is there anyone currently in politics, either in Canada or internationally, that you've looked to and seen some of those traits and characteristics of Angus?
well, strangely, this may not seem like an obvious choice, but and the jury is still out. It's early days, but I have some faith in Mark Carney, and I'm not saying that as a liberal. I think I might actually be saying that if he were the leader of the Conservatives. I don't mean I would necessarily vote that way, but Mark Carney is someone who is not, he's grown up in the world of government and public policy. He has not grown up in the world of politics. And I think it's time for a leader who has not spent the previous 25 years learning about learning how to, learning the ways of politics that I think are really disenfranchising constituents and Canadians and voters. And he's someone who understands policy first. He spent his life doing policy. So it's not power that seems to be his first go-to position. It's policy. What are we going to do to fix this? And I think we've seen that kind of no-nonsense approach so far. And I'm not naive enough to think that he's not surrounded by people who grew up in the world of politics.
Right.
But I hope I hope what happened to Michael Ignatieff does not happen to Mark Carney. I had some hope when Michael Ignatieff sprang upon the scene, because he was not a politician either. He was an academic. He was undeniably smart, intelligent, a good orator, and he had a lot of great qualities. But I think what happened was he was overtaken by his staff. He was overtaken by the people around him, and they turned him into just another politician. And I think, and as soon as that happened, I think the bloom was off the rose, and I think it became impossible for him to achieve any of his goals, because he wasn't taking advantage of the benefits that he brought as someone who was an outsider, someone who could turn a virtue, which I think it was a virtue that I think that he lived some of his life outside of Canada. What kind of international perspective does that bring to him? I think that's a great benefit. But of course, it was turned into a partisan campaign slogan, just visiting. He was just visiting Canada. And anyway, I hope Carney, who is an extraordinarily substantial person, I think he's got a great advantage over. I mean, I don't think there's anyone in the Prime Minister's office who's smarter than he is. And that's, I want someone that smart as my Prime Minister. So he's someone I still have some considerable faith in. There's lots of work to do, obviously, particularly what's going on in the United States. But I like the moves that he's made. I think maybe he hasn't been quite as communicative as he perhaps could have been. I mean, I can go a couple of weeks without thinking about him, because I know he's working hard behind the scenes, but we don't really know what's happening. So yeah, I think he might do a better job at letting us know what's going on in his world. But I do like him. So other than that, I guess there are some others around the world. But I'll stick with Carney for now.
That's totally fair. I mean, Carney holds the record for our most amount of times as winner of the week. It certainly seems to be working for him at this point. The Liberal numbers continue to be high, and his personal numbers as well. I agree with you. Just as somebody who has to fill time on a podcast every week talking about politics in terms of communication, more stuff to talk about is always helpful.
Right. Well, I guess they made an announcement today. Was it $83 million going to for tariff relief in the Atlantic provinces? I think so.
Yeah,
it's good.
It's impressive. Yeah, certainly. So
that's good.
Absolutely. No, it's all good stuff. Well, I was going to ask a question about Carney, but that answers that.
But I killed that.
Let's turn a little bit. I want to focus a little bit on just political satire, and that because there seems to be something about politics that tickles our brains in a satirical way. People like yourself, Armando Iannucci, Lorne Michaels, people seem to be able to grab onto the funny in politics even when there isn't really funny topics at play. What do you think it is about human nature that wants to laugh about these issues?
Well, a couple of things. Satire, to me, can be a trenchant instrument of social comment. And normally, or often, when we oppose what a government is doing, rage is the staple in our arsenal. We're angry. We go to Parliament Hill with our placards and we pump them and we shout and we're angry. And when I worked on Parliament Hill, every single day when I walked up across the lawns of Centre Block and into my office, which was in the Confederation building next door, there was a different group protesting something on Parliament Hill, usually protesting government action or inaction on a certain issue. And I remember the first week I worked on Parliament Hill, there was an afternoon protest and a morning protest, and you had different slots. And when I would be there when the protest was on, I would stop and I would listen. And I would be interested. I mean, this was the world I had just arrived in. I wanted to learn as much as I could. I didn't always agree with what they were protesting, but anger was the common thread that ran through all of those protests, those rallies. And I can tell you that after 3 weeks, I would walk by and not listen anymore, because through repetition, this anger became wearing on me, and I couldn't handle it anymore. And what I've discovered about satire is that I think it can be used as a way to break through the monotony of the anger. Not that the anger is not justified, it's completely justified, but as a practical matter of enlarging your pool of supporters and getting people on your side and signing the petitions and getting them to take action. I sometimes wonder whether the impact of rage through repetition and its frequency, its impact is diminished over time, and people stop listening and it just washes over them. So humor to me is potentially a different entry point to persuade people to get involved, because satire takes aim at usually power, unchecked power, and governments are often the subject of satire. Sometimes there are social satires that look at, trends in society, but satire is, it's the granddaddy, if I could use that phrase, which seems rather sexist rather than using a more gender neutral term, but it's the big kahuna when governments are the big kahuna when it comes to the target of satire. And satire takes aim at things, unchecked power, things that are wrong. And it's humor, but it's humor with a mission. It's humor with a purpose. It's intended to mobilize people. It's intended to weaken. When you laugh at something, you weaken it. So if we can laugh at government and the things that they're doing that we don't believe are in the public interest, inevitably that weakens their hold on power. And they might be more frightened of satire than they are of anger, because there's so much anger going around that it's hard to keep track of what I'm angry about right now. So you break things up by introducing humor as a way to do that. So I was no less committed to educating and mobilizing Canadians around the issues and politics that bothered me by using humor and satire, no less committed than others are when they are angry about how things are working. And Angus, for me, embodies the kind of politician that we need more of. And yeah, maybe it's a little unrealistic, a little far-fetched, but if there were 5 Anguses, and then 12 Anguses, and then a cabinet filled with Anguses. Imagine the kind of government we might have. And that's what I was trying to illuminate, in a way, through stealth. I didn't want people to know that I was proselytizing about the problems we have with democracy and how we might fix them. But that's what I was trying to do under the table there, under the humor. I wanted people to laugh their way through the story. But I think it's impossible to read that novel. Well, not impossible. I mean, some people can read it just as a funny story, I guess. But I think there's enough substance in the novel that I think people, even if they're not really aware of it, that subconsciously they can be thinking about some of the issues that I've tried to illuminate, and look at how Angus McLintock is dealing with them and his position. And sometimes he runs into problems, but that's realistic. When you're bucking the trend, when you're trying to turn around an ocean liner, the ocean liner of Canadian partisan politics that's been gaining momentum since 1867, it's not going to be an easy job to do. So he's naive, and you see that in the novel. He gets pelted with cookies and donuts and things like that when he does something that his constituents don't like. But ultimately, I think he's able to persuade his constituents that it's in the public interest. It's in their interest, ultimately, as citizens of a nation, to do this and not to fall victim to NIMBYism, and which is a very selfish, self-serving approach to politics. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling here.
No, it's all good. It's perfect, Terry. It leads into what I wanted to ask to kind of conclude our conversation on Best Laid Plans and the Angus series, which is that you struggled to get Best Laid Plans published, and then you podcasted it chapter by chapter. It goes on to win the Leacock, gets published, wins Canada Reads, becomes a CBC miniseries. What do you like? Do you think that it's that kind of messaging and that kind of similar thing to Angus that connected with listeners, readers, voters, that the publishers were just missing in the beginning?
Yeah, I sure hope that's the explanation. I believe it is the explanation, but it's hard to get hardcore empirical data to support that. But I think that's what happened. And really, it's not unusual for an absolute nobody in the publishing world like me, who'd never written anything before in my life. I mean, destined, in the hopes of it being published. I was a professional writer really for most of my career, but I was writing for clients and that sort of thing. But it was not unusual at all for me to be greeted with a deafening silence when I tried to find a literary agent or a publisher. I mean, for crying out loud, I'd written a satirical novel of Canadian politics. I don't think anyone at publishing houses or literary agencies were clamoring for, we need another big political satire. It just wasn't on their radar. And, I think they probably, I'm sure they thought, who's going to buy this? Do Canadians really want to read about politics in a satirical sense? So it was not, I was disappointed, but it was, in hindsight, now that I know so much more about the publishing world, 17 years later, it was not unusual. And I didn't even wait. It seemed like an interminable length of time. I spent a year trying to get an interest in the novel. And I didn't even get rejection letters. That's the kind of impact I made on the traditional publishing establishment. I couldn't generate an automated rejection letter. So a year seemed like an interminable length of time for me to wait. But in publishing terms, a year is not that long. The publishing world moves in geological time, it seems to me. So, but I didn't know that. So I went ahead and self-published it, and it was really I don't know what it was. It seemed like folly at the time. I submitted it to the Leacock Medal for my own. I was the publisher, so I submitted it on behalf of the author, who I was also the author, and just on a lark. And to make a long story short, it won the Leacock Medal, which changed my life as a writer almost in an instant, certainly overnight. And I've had a charmed publishing and writing life ever since. So I'm glad that whatever my motivations were, I'm glad that I took the step to submit it when I was very uncertain about it. But it changed everything for me. But I do think that when it finally entered the public mainstream, when McClellan and Stewart picked it up, when it won Canada Reads and immediately was read by hundreds, a few 100,000 people, that's the power of Canada Reads, and is probably what has allowed me to have all of my subsequent novels as national bestsellers. Without Canada Reads, that probably wouldn't be the case, to be honest. But I think that Canadians were ready for an Angus McLintock. I think they were ready for someone to champion a new approach to politics, where the public interest is put first, where the partisanship is toned down, where there's an ethical approach, professional approach to debate, where we're not being so personal, because you just want to turn question period off when you when you watch it these days. You want to turn it off. Bringing cameras into the legislature and the Parliament and Parliament of Canada was intended to make democracy transparent, and it has. We now see how politics works, and I don't know how anyone can stomach watching the entire hour of question period, because it doesn't speak very well of the state of politics. So I think there is an appetite for it, and I was purposeful when I wrote the novel. It was, to me, more than just a funny novel. I never thought of it as humor. I always thought of it as satire. I think there's humor in lots of my other novels, but certainly in those first two, I had satire on my mind and a goal in mind when I wrote them. Even if some people, maybe many people, read them and just laugh their way through them and think they're great stories, I think I'd be more fulfilled if they gave passing thought to some of the issues that underlie the fun.
Absolutely. Well, I was 15 years old reading Best Laid Plans in grade 9 in the school cafeteria, and it certainly helped wake me up, Terry. So
good. Well, that was you were my part of my target, and occasionally I'll get an email from somebody. I got an amazing email from someone who said that they ran for their local nomination and sometimes secured it. I mean, this happened a number of occasions because they read the Best Laid Plans. And there was one family where the son, who was a conservative, ran because the Best Laid Plans affected him so much. And then he gave the novel to his father, who was a liberal. And his father then ran for the Liberal nomination and got it in a different riding. Wow. And, those stories, that's why we write. That's why we write, when you can have people respond, putting their own lives and livelihood kind of on the line because they read something in a book and it affected them. So it's been an extraordinarily gratifying experience for me from the very beginning, and continues to be.
I'm glad. Well, I'll add in, Terry. I'm running for city council right now in Stratford, Ontario.
Good
for
man.
next
Good
year's
for you.
elections. So throwing that plug out there.
Good for you. Well, look, we need more people
now,
out there doing that. So good.
absolutely. Now you have a book coming out in October, The Marionette. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the Marionette is not. It's not. Well, I was going to say it's not a political book. In some ways, it's quite political, and you won't know this unless you read the novel because it's not touched upon in the back cover copy. But Angus McLintock is in this new novel.
Oh.
Now, it's not an Angus story. It's not an Angus novel, but you may recall at the end of Operation Angus, the third novel in the Angus series, if it's a series, he's appointed Minister for Public Safety, which means he has responsibility for CSIS, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. And the novel is about a famous and rich, high-profile Canadian thriller writer whose name is James Norville, and he's done exceedingly well with his novels. These Hollywood blockbuster films made of each one. I mean, think he's like Tom Clancy or one of those, the biggest thriller writers in the world. He's transcends Canadian borders, but writing thrillers, even really successful thrillers, was his fallback plan, his plan B. What he wanted to do 30 years earlier was to work for CSIS. He applied for CSIS to work in clandestine operations when he was 25 years old. And this isn't a giveaway. You can read this on the back of the book. And he went all the way through the recruitment process and washed out right at the final stage. And they never explained why. They just said, thank you, you're not being accepted. And this stuck in his craw and has stuck in his craw for his entire life, not knowing why, and the fact that he didn't make it when he was doing so well. So his fallback position was not to be active in real clandestine operations. It was to write fictitious clandestine operations and have a CIA hero, a recurring character named Hunter Chase, which to me was a great Hollywood name for his character. But still, it still bugs him to this day. He's now in his early 50s, and it still bugs him. So what he's famous for in his novels is getting all the details right and making you feel like you're right there, which means if he writes a novel that's set in Kuala Lumpur, he goes there and researches Kuala Lumpur and what's going on there. So in this case, the novel opens. When a novel opens, he's in an interrogation cell in Tajikistan.
Okay.
Because his next novel is set in Tajikistan, and he gets, detained by Russian military when he's taking, telephoto lens photographs of the Russian airbase in Tajikistan. Anyway, he's rescued from that. I won't say how or why, but the Canadian embassy in Kazakhstan gets involved, and he is, because of his high profile, a Canadian diplomat spirits him away from the penal colony that he's been held in, and he's driven immediately to the airport. And there's a private jet waiting at the airport, and inside the jet is Angus McLintock and Vivian Kent. Vivian Kent, you might remember from Operation Angus, is a former head of CSIS and is now, but because of her arthritis and her age, she retired. But she's become the minister's personal advisor on intelligence matters. And they are waiting for him on the plane because they need his help. He can't understand why they need his help, and they eventually explain it as they fly to Madrid. And They need his help because James Norval is the favorite author of the newly installed president of Mali, West Africa, in the wake of a military coup.
Okay.
And there's a CSIS operation going into Mali because 15 Canadian mining executives, a Canadian gold mine in Mali, of which there are at least 2 in real life. The new government has nationalized the mining industry and detaining them and making sure they keep running the mine, and all the money is coming directly to the government. And the CSIS mission is to exfiltrate, to get the Canadians out across the border into Senegal. They need Angus they need James Norval because he's their ticket in, because the new president he's his favorite author. So that's the cover story, that he's going in to research a new novel about a West African country in the wake of a coup. But who's really running the mission is this young Black woman Canadian her name is Lauren Cooper, or Coop for short. She's running the operation and isn't really happy about having an inexperienced civilian as part of the team. But she's in charge of the mission, but her cover story is she's his research assistant. So he's in charge in the cover story, but she's in charge in the clandestine story. And
Right.
It's how they work together and how they end up trying to get these Canadians out. I won't tell you whether it happens or not. But anyway, so that's the new novel. I had fun writing it. I wanted to try to write a comic thriller. Operation Angus was kind of a comic thriller as well.
Mm-hmm.
But, to take the high stakes world of a thriller novel, of where bloodshed and mayhem and death are all part and parcel of a thriller novel, but also make it funny. The two don't often coexist, and certainly not easily. So I'm trying to do that. Although it's not, I wouldn't say that it's hilarious on every third page or anything like that, but I hope it's funny in places.
Great. Well, thanks very much for explaining that, and I can't wait to read it.
Probably more than you wanted to know about it.
No, absolutely. The more the better. Go out and buy it. It's out. When is it out, Terry?
It's out October the 7th. October the 7th it's out, but it's available for pre-order now. And not to be shilling too much, but pre-orders are really helpful because they count all of the pre-orders in the first week of the book's existence. So it's the easiest way for new novels to break onto the bestsellers list is if there's a whole whack of pre-orders.
So go pre-order the Marionette, everyone.
Pre-order it now at your favorite independent bookstore, or at Amazon or Indigo, or from wherever you may be listening.
Absolutely. All right. Now we're going to move into our Winners of the Week segment. If you enjoyed today's conversation with Terry Fallis, you'll definitely want to check out his books. His award-winning debut, The Best Laid Plans, along with The High Road and Operation Angus, and his upcoming novel, The Marionette, are all available on Amazon. We've included affiliate links in the description below. That means if you purchase through those links, it won't cost you anything extra, but it will help support No Power Panel. We really appreciate whatever support you can give us, and please enjoy Terry's writing. It's great. Welcome to Winners and Losers of the Week. This week, I'm very thrilled to be joined by Canadian author Terry Fallis. He's been joining me to talk all about his Canadian political writing, featuring the famous character Angus McLintock and his trusty aide Daniel Addison. He also has a new book coming out in October called The Marionette. Thanks for joining us this week for Winners and Losers, as well as the full episode, Terry.
My pleasure.
All right, so we'll go into our winners and losers. Generally, we do losers first. And I like to put the guest on the spot and say, Terry, who is your loser for politics for the week?
All right. Well, you didn't specify Canadian politics when you asked for winners or losers. So my loser this week is French President Emmanuel Macron. And I say he's a loser because the government below him, Prime Minister in particular, has been voted out. So the coalition French government has fallen apart. And for the fifth time in the last 2 years, Emmanuel Macron is going to have to cobble together a government and install a new prime minister and try and keep the good ship France afloat while still trying to play the critical role he has come to play in international affairs, whether it's Ukraine or other hotspots in the world. And I think we need Emmanuel Macron there as a voice of reason when we have Donald Trump south of the border. I promise not even to say his name. You can edit that out, Noam, if you wish. So I'm sorry to say that Emmanuel Macron is this week's loser for me, but I hope he soon becomes a winner again by bringing a new government together that earns the support of the French people.
All right, absolutely. Definitely a valid loser, was on my short list as well. I hope you won't mind, Terry, that my loser of the week is Donald Trump.
He's my loser of the next 5 years.
Yeah, exactly, right? I have to be careful because he could be my loser every week, but it would get boring. So I keep him back for when I feel like he's really lost in some way. This week, after denying it and denying its existence, his birthday card to Jeffrey Epstein was released publicly, revealing the truth that they did have a connection, that in all likelihood Donald Trump does appear multiple times in the Epstein files. And given that and how angry people in America from across the political spectrum are about this issue, that makes Donald Trump my loser for the week.
Well earned indeed.
Absolutely. So now we'll move into winners of the week. I can go first for winners.
Right.
My winner of the week are the people of Tunisia, who have shown up in support of the Samud Freedom Flotilla like nobody could have expected. There has been tens of thousands of people on the streets supporting their mission to get aid into Gaza. And I think that the more public support that can be shown for that vital goal, the better. So the people of Tunis deserve to be my winner of the week.
Good. Well, mine is a little more pedestrian.
Fair enough.
And in fact, it's not very substantial either, or substantive. My winner this week is Mark Carney, but not for the good work that we hope he's doing behind the scenes on the tariff issue and on other important issues, reducing interprovincial trade barriers and building new markets for our exports. A little break this week from all of that. He's my winner for running and completing the Halliburton Forest Trail race, which was 26 grueling kilometers up and down. He and his wife showed up kind of unannounced. This wasn't something that you might see Pierre Poilievre do with a news release beforehand to invite everyone to come and watch. Nobody knew he was doing this. He just showed up with a couple of RCMP security in hand. I sort of feel badly for them. It must have been a long day for them running.
Probably.
But he completed it and did so with ease. And I like that we have a prime minister who is really smart, knows economics and policy, former head of Bank of Canada, Bank of England, former Finance Canada Assistant Deputy Minister. I mean, he's a guy who knows his stuff, but he also runs.
Nothing
And
wrong
he's
with that.
physically fit.
Nothing
So,
wrong with that. No, that's good.
That's
That's good. I think that that's a totally valid winner. He as I mentioned, he's our record winner holder because he just keeps doing these kinds of things that get him these wins. And we'll see how long he can keep it going for. But certainly for the time being, he remains the winner of Canadian politics.
good, and I'm happy to have added to the momentum.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me this week, Terry. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's good to see you after all these years, Noam.
You as well. You as well. It's been good to catch up. Where can listeners find you and follow you and the like?
Well, I would, I have a website, terryfallis.com, but for your podcast listeners, they may be more interested in my Substack. I am on Substack. It's called Terry Fallis, A Novel Journey. It's kind of, I think of it as dispatches from the writing life. And I write about all sorts of different topics, and I have a lot of fun doing that. It comes out every second Sunday morning, and it's free. And as far as I'm concerned, always will be free. So it's easy to sign up. You can just go to my website, terryfallis.com, scroll to the bottom of the homepage, and a place to put your email in there, and you can test drive it for a while and see if you enjoy it.
Perfect. So everyone, new reading material from Terry Fallis. Good to
That's
know.
what we need, more reading.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been another week of No Power Panel. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff that helps us in the algorithm. And we do now have a Patreon. You can find us there. The link will be in the video description. You'll get one extra video every other week for the time being. Hopefully that'll increase as we move forward. Thanks again for joining us, Terry.
My pleasure, Noam. All the best with the podcast, and good for you for doing it. We need more citizen engagement in our politics. One of the ways we can do that is by subscribing to No Power Panel.
Thank you very much. All right. Have a good week.